One of my favorite things to do is write an impossible drum beat and send it to my drummer like, you can play this, right?
No, you can f*** right off.
So today I'm going to show you the exact method that I use to write realistic drums. First, we'll have a look at how to actually program the drums, and then after that, we'll have a go at writing a section together as well. So the first thing you're going to need, obviously, when you're programming drums is some sort of drum VST instrument. The drums that I choose to use for most things are GGD. Very nice. And they're really, really good samples. They're made by Nolly and Misha from Periphery. And I like using Modern and Massive, which is one of their drum libraries. The reason being, there's a huge variety of drums and cymbals available, but also quite user-friendly and beginner-friendly. If you're not quite sure about mixing just yet, it's a great tool to be able to just plug in and play, because they have like pre-mixed templates on there, so you could just load this up, select one of the pre-mixed templates, and have a really good sounding drum kit just to program and write with. Now, I use Cubase, and I love Cubase for programming drums because it has a drum editor as well as like the normal MIDI with a piano roll down the side. Once you have your VST instrument and your drums imported into your DAW, I like to route them so that I have multiple outs so that I can do my own mix. If you're not bothered about doing your own mix and you just want to use them as they are, that's also fine. It's not as important. I tend to put all of the kick mics together, all of the snare mics together, all of the tom mics together, the cymbal mics, there are spot cymbal mics, and then the overhead, and then the room. I mean, I mix the kit and I make a pre-mix template, but I'll go into that in another video. I'll show you how to pre-mix a project that you can just jump in. Everything's already there ready to play for writing. I'm sure I'm going to do a video on that at some point. Now, probably the second most important thing about programming drums after you've imported a really nice drum library into your DAW is the velocity at which you're going to hit those drums. Because what you see a lot of people doing is whacking that whapping up the velocity all the way to the top and then just banging every single drum. And don't get me wrong, it sounds great. Smacking a drum as hard as you can sounds great. It's metal as fuck. But it's also very unrealistic, because if you imagine you're a drummer, you're never going to be hitting every single tom, kick, snare, and cymbal as hard as you possibly can. You'd be absolutely fucked by the end of the show. So I normally set my velocity a little bit lower at baseline. So here I have it at 117. So that's not quite the top, but that's somewhere around, you know, anywhere between sort of 100 to 120, somewhere in that range. And then I will adjust those as I'm making a drum pattern. So let's say I want to make a drum pattern here. I'm just going to make a simple. So that is my simple beat. But if you imagine that you're playing this, all of those notes hit at the exact same velocity, so it doesn't sound very natural. Imagine that you are the drummer, and if you're hitting that cymbal, you want 1, 2, 3, 4. So I've gone 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's how we're counting it. 1, 2, 3, 4. So imagine that on every 1, 2, 3, 4, that's the beat keeping cymbal. The drummer won't hit the cymbal at the exact same velocity every time. There will be a difference, especially on the offbeat, because he's going to be hitting that lighter to sort of make a groove. So what we're going to do is we're going to reduce those offbeat cymbals down in velocity. So now it's going to feel like he's got the stick and he's going da 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 da, creating that groove. Okay. So that's the basic of altering the velocities to make it sound more natural. What you tend to find is on the first notes of a bar, you'll hit the cymbals hard and you'll hit the kick hard. The snare will be generally hard on the snare beats where they're meant to land, but then other snare hits like ghost notes and, I don't know, accent snares will have different velocities. So let's try putting in some ghost note snares. The ghost notes are ghost for a reason. They are low velocity. So this one I'm going to have as an accent snare, but we're going to bring it down somewhere around 70. And it's all about using your ear. I will always come back to this. This is my main thing. The best thing that you could use to determine whether something sounds right or wrong is your own ears. You have to trust in your own ears and be like, right, that doesn't quite sound natural, does it? How can I change that sound using velocity? Which one sounds the most natural in the beat? So again, we're going to add an extra kick there. So I want to emphasize different velocities in kicks. So I think kicks, you can generally have them pretty high velocity, but what you've got to remember is when there are a lot of kicks in succession, like let's say they're doing a double bass pattern, like those double bass kicks are not going to hit the bass drum at the same velocity as if you were going to smack it on the first note of the bar. You know, if you're going if you're going those digga are going to be a lot lower in velocity. So let's see what that sounds like. Whereas if they were all just max, although it sounds absolutely class, it's not realistic. So it would probably be more something like this. So what I normally tend to do as well, a little trick for you, is let's say, for example, we're deciding to do a run of kicks. So they're all going to be around this velocity, around 80, 90 velocity. I will have a variation in that just to create some sort of variation, but with only, you know, 3 points of velocity either side of where you want to be. Now that sounds a lot more natural sounding. That's what I would say in terms of the kicks. And you can kind of take that mentality to the toms as well. The first hit of the tom will be a little bit louder, but then if there's fast tom hits in succession, they're going to be lower in velocity as well. So let's put this in practice and try writing a section of this song. So I'm going to start off with a sample that I found on Splice. So what I'm thinking is 2 rounds of that sample into a drum fill into like a really nice groove. So we're going to start with the drum fill. Something like that. Something like 2 snare toms into some splash action. Can't beat a bit of splash action. Let's... Jesus Christ. So a really nice way to fill in the empty space between the accented hits is with ghost notes on the snare. Then we're going in. And then the beat's going to be some sort of groove with that in the background, but obviously it's going to be primarily guitar and bass focused. So I can hear like a on the right hand cymbal. Put the cymbals in. So they're your accented cymbals, so we're going to want one in between. And these ones, oh my word, are going to be less velocity because they're in the middle. They're not your accented crashes, but they're obviously there to fill out the space. We're going to give a little bit of variation to the actual accent crashes as well. Now basically what we need to do is, where the kicks are going to go is determined by the pattern of the guitar and bass that we're going to play. Now this is obviously, I've talked about this in other videos, but you can write riffs with a rhythm first approach. So here I will decide where the bass and guitar notes are going to go by placing the kicks. And then when I pick up my guitar later to actually write the riff, I might decide, I prefer it to be here. So then I'll go back into the drum MIDI, change that after, and then kind of go back and forth between the drums and guitar till we work out what feels right for placement of those heavy hitting notes. Okay, so second hit's going to be slightly less. Dum 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 dum. So the kick pattern here is pretty straightforward, definitely doable with 1 foot, which means we've got a left foot available to hit the pedal of the hi-hat. Cool, and then all that's left to do is place the ghost notes. Now, here's a little trick for you. The reason why I like going cymbals, kicks, snares, and then pedal hats is when it comes to placing ghost notes in your beats, in your grooves, it actually shows you the empty space where a ghost note will probably sound pretty good. So here, for example, if I wanted to place a ghost note somewhere before that first snare, I'm looking for the empty pocket. I'm looking for the space where the ghost note will fill, which won't interrupt with the general groove, because ghost noting at the same time as hitting something else is kind of awkward to play. So if you look here in the notes, you can see there's a line here that goes all the way down where there isn't a note. So that would be a great place for a ghost note because there isn't anything else being hit there. So it'll sound like this. And it kind of fills that groove. So another place would be here. But then the second rule is I don't really like putting ghost notes straight after main snare hits because it's, again, when you play that, it's not really realistic. It's not to say it can't be done, but I don't think it sounds very natural playing. So the next spot for a ghost note would be here, where there is another gap. Here. So I'm basically just filling in those gaps where the ghost notes are going to be, and then obviously the last one there. So now with the ghost notes included, it sounds like this. Again, we've just made that drum beat more complex simply by placing ghost notes in the little pockets where nothing else is occupying. So that's a little trick for you there. So the last thing that I like to do with a beat is, obviously at the moment we're hitting 2 crashes on the first beat and then we're just riding away on that right hand crash. The other thing that I like to do is match accent crashes with kicks somewhere in the beat to make it a little bit more interesting. So this can be an accented splash, it can be an accented china, stack, left hand crash, whatever hand is free. So for example, the first one that I like that I can sort of see is here because it's not too busy. We've got a ghost note coming up. So if you were to put an accent crash there, it would sound like this. Cool. So it's definitely a good place to put one, but I'm going to take it out because this is the first round of the beat. So we don't want to make it too busy too soon. So for example, on the second go around, I might include that accent crash. Cool. The last part about this groove now, so it's obviously an 8-bar groove. We're going to do a fill to loop us back round into another 8 bars of drum stuff. You've got to use your imagination when you're writing fills. You've got to imagine you're in the seat of the drummer. What's actually physically possible in terms of 2 hands and feet? A fill can kind of start wherever feels right. Sometimes it's, half a bar. Sometimes it's a full bar. So mine's going to be half a bar. That's what feels right to me. So we're going to take everything out. So we're going to use our mind to imagine what we want the sound to be. I'm imagining something like something like that. Okay, so that's a cool fill. So on the second iteration round, we're going to do another alteration in the drumming just so that it's not sounding all repetitive. We're still keeping that groove, that but we're obviously going to change what we do to make it sound a little bit different. So that's not going to make sense. So we're going to have to hit the china first, then left hand crash. The reason being is where I had the china before, if you imagine on the drum kit, your china is on your right on this particular kit, and the right hand crash is there as well. So you're not going to be able to do that quick. So you swap them around. So you hit the china first, then your left hand crash, then you're back to your right hand ride. So that's going to be easy to play. I'm going to change the rhythm of the right hand by using some sort of polyrhythmic notation on the stack or china, whichever one sounds best. So we're going to hit the stack there instead. And what we're going to do is in the gaps, we're going to do ghost notes. Oh yeah. So I've just written a quick fill there. Cool. So in context now. So now I'm just going to add some guitars and bass and see if we can create an interesting riff groove out of the drums that we've written. One thing I'll say is, as I'm creating the rhythm for the guitars and bass, I might decide I want to take bass drums out to let those instruments have their room to breathe and to fill that space in terms of the frequencies and the sound. So you will see me removing kicks just by putting the bass notes in roughly where I want them to be. I've thought of an idea, which means I'm going to have to change the fill between the 2 rounds of drums, because we're going to do an overlapping fill which goes past the start of the next bar. Big long chords there. I'm going to change the kick pattern entirely now because I'm a guitarist and that's what we do. Da, da, dun, 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 da, da. So the drum beat's going to need to change a lot. So one thing that you can do is when the snare hit lands on a hit that you would want to put a kick drum on, so like there, the accented note is going to be da, da, dun, 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 da, da, but that third one is a snare hit. So if you put the kick on top of the snare, you'll drown it out a little bit. So one little trick that you can do, and it also creates groove, is put the kick a literal beat before it. Oh yeah, we're starting to get there now. So the groove is roughly the same, just the kick pattern is completely different from what we started from. But again, this is the creation process. This is what happens. Right, let's layer some guitars in. Big chords, we're going to go. Obviously, we started working on the drums first. I've changed the drums a lot. The main rhythm and some of the fills are the same. I've basically just changed the kick patterns according to what I ended up deciding to play on the guitars. So this is what we've ended with. And there you go. That's sounding pretty good. And if you want to see more about songwriting and how I go about that, then check out this video. But otherwise, thanks for watching.